And thank you for listening. I'm Scott Sullivan, Discipleship Catalyst with the Georgia Baptist Mission Board, and our team exists to strengthen Georgia Baptist churches in the area of discipleship. We've developed 3 tools just for you. The Watershed Principle, which identifies the 6 main ministries of the church that must be healthy to produce world-impacting disciple makers. The Spark Conference. Last year's conference saw over 33,000 views from 45 different states and 18 countries. This year's conference will premiere on August the 12th with best-selling author Tony Evans, Ben Mandrell, president of Lifeway, and David Kinnaman, the president of the Barna Group. We also have learning communities that are set up throughout Georgia, which exist to help you finish the task of leading your family in ministry well. You can see our website to find one near you. Also, every Thursday at 3 p.m., you can catch this broadcast through Facebook, Instagram, or multiple podcast platforms. Now, let's join today's broadcast. Welcome, friends, and I have a fabulous panel today and topic for us to discuss here with Georgia Baptist Discipleship. Joining me is Dr. Steve Parr. He's the Executive Director of the Gwinnett Baptist Association and former Vice President of the Georgia Baptist Mission Board. Now, he's also a well-known author in 2 of my favorite books, The Coffee Shop That Changed a Church and Why They Stay, helping parents and church leaders make investments that keep children and teens connected to the church for a lifetime. Just 2 great resources that have made a huge impact, not just in the South here, but really across the nation. Now, Steve's also a leading voice in the nation on leadership development, Sunday school, groups, ministry, and we'll give him an opportunity at the end to talk about his website so you can get further incredible resources from Steve Parr. Now, Steve's married to Carolyn, and they have 3 wonderful daughters, and so grateful for his ministry and his family. Also, we're going to have Pastor Jay Hackett. He's the pastor at Peachtree Corners here in Georgia. Now, he's been the pastor since 2013, and Jay's also served several years prior to that in student ministry. I think he said 14 years. So just a wealth of knowledge and experience in the trenches, local church leadership. And I would say Jay being one of our leading pastors here in the Georgia Baptist Convention. Now, Jay's married to Amy, and together they've got 2 wonderful daughters. So he not just has the pastor ministry, but he's also got that incredible family core dynamic bringing to what we are talking about today. Now, let me give a reminder here. This broadcast is a product of the cooperative program dollars that are at work. So thank you for giving generously to that. And our team wants to give away a pile of resources today. So make sure that you leave a comment below and you'll be entered into that drawing at the end of the broadcast. Matter of fact, things we're going to be giving away are a few of, in addition to some things, these are some of Dr. Parr's books that he's written: Sunday School That Really Excels, Sunday School That Really Responds, and Sunday School That Really Works, among other things. So, Steve, man, so good to have you and Jay today. Now, your blog that you wrote was entitled 4 Keys to Getting Your Bible Study Groups Back on Track Post-COVID. Right. So just great insight for our leaders, and we're going to be dropping that link if they haven't read that already. It's on our website. So let me just jump straight in here and give you a question, and let's work through some of the things that you mentioned in there, because you talked about a soft launch and a hard launch for getting groups back or upgrading their groups experience. Take us a little deeper into what that looks like, and what a church who has, what if they've already begun gathering groups back? Can they do this emphasis as well to create that momentum going into August?
Great question, Scott, and I appreciate it. I'm so glad to be with you guys. Glad to be with Jay, good friend. And so thank you, and thank you for watching this today. And we're recording this. If you're watching it live, of course, you're watching it in April, or maybe you're watching a recorded version. But the bottom line is, in the spring of 2021, we're 1 year and a month into the pandemic now. Depending on how you measure it, really around mid-March is when it began to affect us in the U.S. in terms of we, in many cases, in most cases, closed down in-person gatherings in our churches. And we understand why. There's some fear, of course, and some lack of understanding of how this is going to affect us. And so within about 4 to 6 weeks, churches slowly began to reopen, but very slowly. But we're at the point now, according to Lifeway research I saw just last week, right now, about 75% of our churches are having an in-person experience for worship. And it's about 2/3 for their small groups, but a lot of those are still online, just to be aware of that. So what I'm talking about here is we're now looking post-COVID. Now, Scott, I don't know about you, but when this all hit, I kept thinking this will all be over in a couple of months, right?
Yes.
And I kept thinking that and kept thinking that. And so it's just drug on and on and on. But I think now with the vaccines and the therapeutics and us understanding protocols and moving towards herd immunity, that we honestly are seeing light at the end of the tunnel. And even apart from COVID, Scott, I've always proposed that August, when school starts back, is the Baptist New Year. You ever heard that? The Baptist New Year?
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
And the reason is we reorganize our Sunday school, small groups, whatever you call those. We promote our kids, our preschoolers, our high schoolers. We promote them up a grade. On the adult level, we do some reorganization sometimes. And so for me, Scott, I've always begun that process in the spring of getting ready for August. Well, here we are. So we talk about a hard launch and a soft launch. A hard relaunch is right now planning towards August, getting all of your ducks in a row to have your Sunday school fully back. Now, let me say fully back may not be 100% of what you had pre-COVID. I think you need to plan for 80 to 100%, right in that range. I think if you're 80%, you'll be strong actually, and you can rebuild from there. And we'll talk about that if you want to, but we've always wondered if we could have a chance to restart or recreate our Bible study groups, because of some of the struggles. And we'll talk about that more later. This is a great opportunity. But Scott, I've always in May begun enlistment process for August. Now's the time to do that. So that's the hard launch. And we'll dive a little deeper if you want to also on that, but also a soft launch. If you're not meeting in person right now, I want to encourage you to begin that process and not wait until August. I know many of you are, not just online, but also some in-person groups. Now, it's going to be a lot smaller right now. If you had 3 student classes, middle school, high school, it may just be 1. If you had 7 adult classes, it may just be 3. If you had 4 children's classes, it may just be 2 or 1. So it's going to be smaller. But the soft launch is going ahead and getting accustomed to the protocols. Hopefully they'll ease up, but going to get used to those and getting people together. And so many of you have already had that soft relaunch, but now's the time to plan the hard relaunch in August when the school year starts back.
That's really good, Steve, because what I hear you saying is we can't wait until the moment when we want things to be better to decide to plan for that. Like I've said often that it's okay to fail, but it's not okay to be mediocre.
Yes.
And when we are looking at knowing that we're coming out of this pandemic and we want to be successful on the backside of this, there's some planning, there's some strategic investment in setting up that we've got to do. Man, really good, especially, because this is the first time I've heard a leader talk about a soft launch. Let's get some things going. Let's figure some things out, what it might look like leading into that hard launch.
On the soft launch, there's really no pressure at all. And on soft launch, we're not even worried about the attendance compared to anything. We're just trying to get the ball rolling, get some people back. And again, some of you have already done that and instituted into in-person. But the hard launch, as you said, you can't wait until July to figure this out, because you may be having to retrain and re-enlist new leaders in your groups, because we're now a year removed perhaps from when you were full steam ahead. And so if you wait until July to start that process, you're going to come up short. So that's why you got to begin now getting ready for August.
Man, that's so good, Steve, because one of the other things that I'm hearing in a lot of our churches are a number of those group leaders that they were depending on and may have been heroes in the past. They're not even in the church anymore. Like they're probably in a lot of our churches. It's not just having to get our leaders back going. It may be a training new leaders who maybe haven't led before. So man, that's just a great thought.
That's a great point. In that you may have somebody that's been out, and I'm not judging anybody for attending to their health, and you may assume they're watching online and they're coming back, but you may find out later, no, they've already moved somewhere else. They've taken advantage, so to speak, of this pause to, make another decision, and that's where you are. So you've got to know where you stand. So now's the time to begin getting ready for August. Don't wait.
Great word. Pastor Jay, let me move to you for a second here, because in Steve's blog, we talk about groups and adding groups. And this is a common topic in our tribe. People who listen or engaging with us know that we talk about the importance of multiplying groups out. I spoke at a church recently and had a pastor caution me not to talk too much about multiplying or adding groups or splitting groups, because as people had a bad experience in the past years ago. So here's my question for you. Can you help us understand, from a real world in the trenches pastor, just why adding groups is so important for the church and the sustainability of the church?
Absolutely, Scott. Thank you so much for having me on today, and enjoy being a part of this, and excited to see how God's going to use it just to continue to further his church around the globe. We're all in this thing together, and I think we're all just trying to figure it out, one step at a time, and realizing that nothing will return to what it was. But we want to use this now as that baseline to move forward and go, okay, what are the next steps? How do we do this? And, anytime you talk about launching new groups, there's always this feeling of fear inside of some of your people. What's going to happen to my friends? What's going to happen to this group that we've spent so much time with and developed so many intimate relationships with? And just the key for me in our church and how we continue to lead is just to battle what we're all going to battle is that insider focused mentality, right? If we're not careful, I think the number one thing that we begin to see inside of our small groups is it becomes about us. And the key from leadership, from the top down, whether it's from the pulpit or whether it's from, whoever's over your discipleship ministry and your Sunday schools, is constantly reminding people we exist to see people come to know Christ, right? The Great Commission in Matthew 28 is very clear. He says, go baptize. Well, there's got to be a season in which they're not followers of Christ. We've got to be reaching people that are not yet there. And our mind has to be, okay, how do we do that? How do we constantly keep other people in mind? How do we keep that in front of them in such a way where they're looking to grow? And so it's that insider focused, I think, is one of the things we've got to look at. The second thing is, I think some of us have been churched so long, we forget what it's like to be new in church. And, think about, we've got a couple of our life groups. Our church has been around for about 38 years, and we have several founding members that are still engaged in our church, connected to our church. And so some of our life groups, which is what we call our small groups, have been together for 30 plus years. And so as you watch some of these groups, I laugh all the time at them because I go in there and they've got pictures on their wall from the lake events they've done, from the trips that they've done, all of those things. And you look around the room and you're like, well, that couple's still here. That couple's still, all these people are still here. And I'm like, how do you think that makes an outsider feel? When they walk in the room and they already know I'm 20 years behind on every inside joke. I'm 20 years behind on every story. This is difficult for me to break into. And we've got to think, okay, so what's going to make it easy? And so we look at it to go, if we can launch new groups at least every year, that it gives new people the opportunity that are walking into our church to go, you know what? I know that community is a huge part of the church. I think that's been the biggest thing missing throughout this pandemic is that community aspect. And the church is built on that community. And so as we're looking forward, it's like, all right, if we're launching new groups, if we're starting new things, then we're giving people easy on-ramps, at least once a year. And Steve, we use your hard launch of August just as that natural push for us. We do more of a soft launch in January, but our hard push is definitely in August to say, hey, here's some new groups that are starting. We contact all the new families that have since joined our church that maybe have not gotten plugged in, and start pointing them in those directions so that we can see more people getting involved, taking that next step, because we always see connection as a huge part of someone that eventually is going to get sold out to the mission of the church and want to be a part of the solution going forward.
Man, that's really good. Let me double click on something that I heard both of you say here, because Steve mentioned how important it was to think ahead of time. Now, Jay, you mentioned, the soft launch, the hard launch, and how you were preparing people, but also you talked about culture, because and that's really what this issue comes down to, because this is the first time, I just like transparent here. This is the first time in my adult life that I've ever gone to church and didn't have to be there. Like I'm not serving on a staff, I'm serving at convention now. So this idea of being in the church and people forgetting what it's like to be lost and forgetting what it's like to be a guest who comes into the church. Listen, we were in Northwest Louisiana, Barksdale Air Force Base, and I would hear every month people come through like, it's just hard to kind of break through. And I'm like, man, I don't get that. This is the sweetest people I've ever been with. I didn't get it. I had forgotten what it's like to be lost. I'd forgotten what it's like to be a guest. So your perspective right here, Jay, is huge for people that are coming into that. Now, so just quickly here, how are you battling that specifically with your people? How do you try to, because this is a huge issue across the board, across the nation, across the world. Do you have any thoughts there on how to keep people focused on guests that may be coming in? Because we're headed into Easter right now.
We are. And, I think the church has a tendency to get them the first time, but we don't keep them, if that makes sense. And so the focus as we go in are expect guests. And anytime we get pushback, whether it's from younger or older people that are part of our church, that we just remind them of our vision. Hey, this is why we're here, right? God didn't put us here to be a country club. We've got the Atlanta Athletic Club 15 minutes from us. You pay your money, you can go join there, have everything you want. God's called us here to reach this community for Christ, to be a beacon. And that means that everybody can, the four things we say, come as you are, connect with others, be committed to the mission, and go change the world. And so the more we can keep that in front of our people, it's just a reminder of, hey, I know you loved the church when it was 20 years ago. I know that you love that, but guess what? The same thing you desired 20 years ago was to reach those 30-year-olds with young families. It's the same desire today. The difference is you're no longer that 30-year-old. And so I want you to think about your kids. I want you to think about your grandkids. I want you to think about them having a foundation upon which their lives can be built, so that when they're in their 70s, man, they're following your footsteps hard, thinking about their kids and their grandkids. And it's that constant reminder. We get pushback all the time. Yeah. Nobody likes change, and this pandemic is giving every pastor an opportunity to change everything. And, so people are going to be coming back and coming back into things they're not comfortable with. And unfortunately, everybody right now, Tom Rainer said it best. He said, we're having decision fatigue and opinion fatigue. Right. And, everybody's sharing their opinion. And guess what? They're always going to share their opinion. And so just love them, because we are called to pastor and to shepherd. But I think lovingly continuing to point them back to the vision of, here's why we do what we do. Here's why we do what we do. And here's how you're vital to that. We're not moving you out to pasture. We need you. I love the fact that we're a multi-generational church, because I want every age group pouring into the lives of our church members and reaching people in our community where they are right now. And it's been a blessing to be able to be a part of something like that.
Well, that's solid. And I've heard it said this way, Jay, and then I'll pitch this next one to Steve. Average leaders, because this talks about vision that you're addressing here. Average leaders give people something to work on. Great leaders give people something to work for. And that vision, our language leads culture. People create culture, that's right, but language leads culture. So good, Jay. Now, Steve, I made a statement in summer of 2020 that this is the greatest opportunity for a ministry reset that I've ever seen in my lifetime. Let me just move that into your court. And do you agree with that? And if so, unpack for leaders who have known certain things needed to change, but they've been hesitant to pull the trigger. Okay. Help us unpack that a little bit.
Well, first, broadly speaking, I agree, but let's talk specifically about our small groups and talk about moving towards August. You know, Scott, for those of us as pastors or educators, discipleship leaders who have ever led, we've always run into those walls of don't split my class. We don't want to change rooms. This is our room. This is our space. And that we don't want to do outreach where we want to, love on one another, don't, keep us together. And we always had this thought, well, I wish I could just start from scratch, just recreate our small groups. This has presented us that opportunity, honestly, because in August, when you relaunch, you can totally re-enlist, reorganize, reset your groups and the way that you do groups. And I think you should take advantage of that, honestly. And it's not a matter of seeking to be innovative, but seeking to be effective. So as you recreate it, it's important, again, to be very principle driven. But as you do recreate it, it may not look like it did last time in terms of size or scope. But there's kind of a contradictory thing here that you got to work on both sides of. One is you've got to organize for who you want to reach, not who actually attends. That's very important. Okay.
Oh, that's really good.
So don't build your structure on who is attending, because right now your attendance may be down. Who is it we want to reach? Give you an example. I've used this illustration many times. You say, we don't have a preschool class or group because we have no preschoolers. Now you've got it backwards. The reason you have no preschoolers, there's no preschool group or no preschool leader. You might say, we don't have a class or group for college age young adults. We have no college around here. We have no college age young adults. Well, every community has 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. And you don't start with the group, you start with a leader. And you build based on who you want to reach. So you do that, but at the same time, don't overbuild. And what I mean by that is this. You may have had 4 student classes, middle school and high school, but if you've only got 4 attending, you don't need 4 groups. One per room is not going to work, and it's going to be awkward. You're probably going to need to back up a little bit. I'm not a fan of consolidating groups. In this case, you may need to meet, temporarily and pull those groups together. So it may be fewer groups to start with, but long term, you want to be multiplying and expanding. You don't grow by contraction. I'm just talking about being intellectually honest. What we got to do in order to launch is based on who you want to reach, but being sure every life stage is represented in your new structure. Those are some general thoughts, Scott. What do you think?
Man, I love it. Let me throw in a quote here that I remember from Jim Osterhaus, I believe is his name. He said, trust is gained like a thermostat, but it's lost like a light switch. And what we're talking about here, Steve, these changes can be difficult. And I think it's important for us to talk about that and just throw that in front of people. But let me just based on something you just said there, as we're going in there and the relational investment, and whether you combine groups and the idea that we certainly think people ought to multiply, that creates change. But some people would say, I don't want to do that because if we fail, then we can't, we lose, that relational trust that we have in people. But I got a different take on that, Steve, and I'd love to hear your response to this. My thought is, let's take the opportunity for a reset, because on the backside of this, we will have gained relational equity with our people because we moved the ball forward during this and coming out of it, rather than sitting back and being complacent. Do you have any thoughts there?
I do. And I'll give you a leadership tip here too, Scott, for everybody listening. When you're making a change or you're introducing something new, if you can use this word, it gives you a lot of grace if it doesn't go exactly right. Use the word pilot. We're going to pilot something new coming up this fall. And by the way, as far as you're concerned, you're going full steam ahead. But when you say that word pilot, it gives you some grace if the ball does drop somewhere, it doesn't go perfectly well. It gives you liberty to readjust even in October and November and say, well, the pilot is just that we're trying. So that word may give you a little grace, whereas in your mind, you're going forward. The word pilot gives some grace for your followers. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Man, I love that. And if I had a microphone, I would drop it right there because that was just so good. let's just be honest, man, it's a fearful time for leaders. And I've also said this, there's never been a more difficult or more strenuous time to be a leader in the local church. So friends, listen, those of you who are watching and listening, just understand that we are praying for you. And we understand the pressure that you're in and on. And matter of fact, Steve, we've got consultants living in the field to help and resource here. And what you're doing, Steve, in that Metro Gwinnett Metro Baptist Association, and those leadership tips on your website are absolutely incredible. So let me shift here to Pastor Jay for this final question, because Steve writes in the blog about this one thing that can lead groups to thrive. So when you say something like that, my ears perk up. And I just love what he mentioned, the phrase here, equipping the saints to do the work of ministry. So let's talk practical. Let's get down to the nuts and bolts here, Jay. What practical things can a pastor do to implement this crucial piece of advice?
Well, for us, the thing that we've looked at is, we've got about 25 different small groups that are currently meeting in our current setup. And as we look at those, we did not want uniformity, right? Because each group doesn't have to be exactly the same, but we do want unity. Mm-hmm. And so we needed to set the standard of what we looked for inside of each one of our life groups. And, our groups use different curriculums. We do approve whatever curriculum is used, but we don't even have like one main curriculum across the board. Ours are very, very varied in that. But what we do is we go back to Acts chapter 2, right? I mean, go back to where Jesus set it up. What's the church look like? What's supposed to happen? And so as we look at our groups, we train our leaders and we say, we want 4 things happening inside of your group. Every single time that you guys are together, here's what we want. Number 1, the message, right? The message is crucial to what happens inside of a small group, because it says that they were devoted to the apostles' teaching. And so we want to make sure that we are rightly dividing the word of truth. And we want to make sure that each one of our leaders are trained to be able to do that. And so we'll have either staff members or elders that from time to time bounce around to each one of our groups to verify that the word of God is being taught the way that it's supposed to be taught. The second thing we look for, I'm a Baptist pastor, so I, have to use my little M's with everything that I do. So it's message, it's mingle is the second part. They devoted themselves to fellowship and that community, that connection. People just realize, and we're at the same age or stage of life, and I'm not in this alone. We all have to figure out, how do we handle our teenagers? How do we handle our parents? That's what we're really dealing with right now. And a lot of people in our church, of how do you parent your parents? And, some of those kind of things at the stage of life. And so let's get together, spend time together, actually want to hang out together. The third thing that we look at is ministry. It says that they began to have everything in common. They would sell off, they would take care of. And so for us, the biggest transition with all of our leaders is to say, listen, you're the front line of defense. And so, the things that, it's not like a hierarchy, but you are the first phone call. I want the life group to know what's going on in somebody's life before the staff knows about it, because you're so connected with those people. And then as things need to be delegated up, we delegate them up. And so if there's a funeral, if there's, someone that needs to be seen, our leaders inside the life groups are typically the first ones to know. And many times we don't even hear about it until after the fact of how they just loved on people and continue to do that. And then the fourth thing we look for is multiplication. And we tell each one of our classes, hey, look, you need to be looking to start new things. And so as you're thinking through it, 10 is about our ideal number, 10 to 20 in total in a class, whether that's 10 couples or whether that's just 20 people that are in a room. And outside of that, we start developing new leaders inside of the group that would then, once that group gets a little closer to 30, we launch it with one of the teachers from that group, and they start their next group. And so they're constantly thinking through that, looking at how to do that. And we keep that in front of our people as often as possible so that they're planning for it, looking forward to it, and really excited about seeing some of those things happen. So for us, it's how do we keep this in front of you? How do we help you? How do we resource you? And just let you know that, hey, we're here to do it with you, but we're not here to do it for you. And I think that's the hard part, with the whole equipping of other people. The church for so long has been, that's what we pay you to do. And it's like, no, not technically. According to Ephesians, you pay us to help equip you. to do the word. Now, that doesn't mean we don't do it with you, but it does mean that, you're doing it. So
that's right, man. Golly, Jay, that's so good. That is so well said, because we do hear that. Let's just be honest. Hey, I hired you to lead people to Jesus. Right. I heard, that's why we have a staff. But man, that is so unbiblical, and it's so tiring. And those pastors who buy into that, man, what I am seeing now from a convention standpoint those are the ones who are beginning to fade, and they're so tired. They're wanting to give up, and there's just no reason to do all the work yourself. It's not biblical, and it's not healthy.
No. I had a seminary professor, Gene Tyre, who was the pastor at First Baptist Noonan for years, back when I was at New Orleans. And Dr. Tyre looked at us one day and he said, "Gentlemen, I want to give you a life lesson that will last you forever if you'll take it and listen to it." He said, "Christ died for the church. You don't have to."
Ooh.
And I was like, wow. Christ died for the church. You don't have to. And he said, right now, you may not understand that, but he said, as you go through ministry, you surely will. And that has been a huge statement in my life personally, and just a great reminder as we've walked through just some of the challenges and some of the things that have been in front of us as a church.
So good. Thank you, Jay. Appreciate you, buddy. Steve, let me kick it back to you for a final remark here, and tell us about your website, because I have been there and there are incredible resources and leadership nuggets that can help our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, one of the things about the time of the pandemic is people have grown accustomed now to more online interaction like we're doing right now. So in terms of equipping, the door's wide open in terms of your leaders. And I hope to be one of those resources for you. Now, I do serve as the director of the Gwinnett Metro Baptist Network. It's our association of 140 churches. I love that. So for last year, my focus has been there. I do have a site called steveparr.net, and just relaunched. And the reason I'm pointing you there, if you're listening, there's over 100 articles on leadership, and especially related to church leadership, small group leadership. Of course, my material on what keeps your kids connected to church to your adult life, including a video series for parents that is absolutely free. So there's a ton of things there. Please go visit steveparr.net and let me continue to pour into you and your leaders. Love to do that through that website.
So great. Dr. Steve Parr, my friend, a mentor, you have poured into my life, invested in me. Thank you for what you've done in my life, but also being on this broadcast. And Pastor Jay Hackett at Peachtree Corners Baptist Church. Man, we love what you're doing. We love the strategic focus and the energy that you're bringing, not just to your church, but to that area. So thank you, gentlemen, for coming on today. And Mike Taylor is our producer. Mike, thanks for coming on. I affectionately call him Tiny because he's 6'9", many pounds, and that sucker is a beast at getting us in online and doing these production elements so well. Mike, we love you, buddy. Thank you for doing that. And remember, if you are listening, make sure to leave a comment, because we are doing our weekly drawing for free resources. And if this is helpful for you in any way, make sure that you share the link to help us maximize gospel impact. And I want to thank you for those of you who are engaging with us this week to help us, because our focus is to help you, to resource you and inspire you to make world impacting disciple makers.
Thank you for listening. And we want to give you a gift: the 5 discipleship shifts most churches need to make to produce world impacting disciple makers. You can get this by going to ministryboom.com. That's ministryboom.com. This 5-page PDF is a discipleship alignment checklist that may surprise you. It will help you learn why programs are killing your discipleship, the number one default worker strategy that keeps churches from empowering their ministries. Learn the OGV factor and how it can revolutionize discipleship, attendance, and evangelism in your church. Again, go to ministryboom.com. The Georgia Baptist Mission Board is able to provide resources like this because of gifts from Georgia Baptist to the cooperative program. For more information on this broadcast and a customized discipleship plan for your church, visit gabaptist.org/discipleship. And by the way, if you found this content helpful, we sure hope you'll share it with a friend. And thanks so much for partnering with us to make world impacting disciple makers.